Greetings, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well, Carl. I'm doing well. We're just, I don't know, chugging along in the later stages of winter here. At least DC area, like February, March time frame is the tail end of winter for us. I think it goes a little bit later for you in
Yeah.
Utah.
Yeah, you start to feel. I was talking about this the other day. I was like, man, in March, you start to feel a little hope. Like you made it through, right? So
And
anyway.
then you get like another foot of snow. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
how it
yeah.
works
And
there?
I've
Okay.
always we have this experience every couple of years where I get to mow my lawn on my birthday, April 24th. I get to mow my lawn and then go ski, right? Like those days are really fascinating
That's
because we get snow up in the mountains.
yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, things are good. Let me ask you a question. I think it'd be fun
Yeah.
to talk a little bit about. I'm I'm always interested in how we take and incorporate, like, okay, I've got a thing that people in the world are going to see. And by thing, I mean like it could be as simple as my business card,
Okay.
you know, my business card, my website, do we still call them like our marketing brochure?
Yeah. Yeah, we got some we still have some of those. Might be a
Yeah,
PDF, but you still
yeah,
email it to
and
people.
like we could almost sort of move up the spectrum, right? Like a business card, a website, a marketing brochure, a white paper, a book, a podcast, like
Okay.
social media
Your your
posts, like
your stakes are getting elevated there on how many people see it, but I'm guessing that's kind of the point of the theme, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Only
yeah.
so
So
many
the
people see my business card. A lot of people will see my podcast here, my podcast, see me
yeah,
on social media.
yeah. So as soon as you go to make a thing, and it actually could even start earlier, you like your logo, right? Or
Yep.
the name of the man, that's a good one. Anytime you're naming something.
Yep.
So, the name of the firm, the name of a book, and you go to do it. And one of the things you do is you ask people
Yep.
for feedback. You ask them, I've stopped using the word, I typically don't use the word feedback anymore. I use the word reaction, which I'm curious about your reaction, which was really actually quite helpful. Um, but as soon as you do that, you get surprise, surprise, you get feedback. And particularly as it gets more public, like something like a book or a post on social media or whatever. But even as fundamental as something like a logo, and you share it with three or four of your friends, and inevitably somebody says something that you don't like or you didn't think like. And the reason I'm thinking about this is I've got a new book coming out in October, and I've worked on the cover design, the title and the cover design, and I've shared it with some people. And yesterday, one of my friends, who I'll just call Aaron, and he said, like, "Hey, before I say anything, I want you to know that opinions are like, what do we? I think I can't, we can't exactly use the right language here, but opinions are like a certain anatomical part of our body.
Everybody.
Everybody has them, and they all stink, right?"
Yep.
So, and then he shared some feedback, and he was like, "I think the title is pretty boring." I was like, "Oh." And I got two or three different, and like I had two different versions of the book cover, and I sent it out, and the feedback came back split.
Yep.
Like half the people loved, like made strong arguments for one, and half the people made really strong arguments for the other one.
Yep.
So I was feeling Tuesday, a couple days ago, I was like, feeling a feeling I remember a lot 10 years ago. And then I sort of got over it. And then I felt it again, which was sort of this like, never mind, or like, forget it, or kind of tied up in knots, or like, nobody likes my stuff. And this book cover's stupid. And the title's dumb. What am I even thinking? And the little imposter syndrome. And I know now to go on a walk, go to bed early, get up the next day, and everything's fine. But I'm curious how you handle, like, when you go to do public work. First of all, how do you solicit feedback?
Yeah.
Do you? How do you solicit feedback? And then what do you do with it? Because I'd love to sort of walk through some of the tips and tricks. We've both done lots of public work. And
Yeah.
so I just thought this would be helpful for people to hear.
So there's a couple of things that are sort of running my through my head around this like overall theme around feedback and taking in feedback, sort of both the like the micro level, right? There's the feedback of, I asked a person, what do you think? What's your reaction? And there's the, you do a thing at some level of in public, right? You launch your new website and you tell everyone about it. You do a thing on social media. You do something that tries to be bigger splash, and like a lot of people may see it. So there's a saying that I have around what we do with our team or internally at Kitces around feedback, because I am a from a business perspective, I am like a table pounding advocate of your business needs feedback loops.
Hmm.
Anytime you do a thing, you need some way that you're going to get feedback from people about whether the thing was useful, valuable, helpful, on target, delivered well, right? We get different feedback in different ways depending on
Hmm.
what it is. So, like anything we launch has a survey
Hmm.
attached to it, has some
Hmm.
questions attached to it, usually a little bit that are, rate this on a 1 to 10 scale kind of thing, and usually some that are a little bit more open-ended, especially if it's something new, because when you're doing something new, sometimes you don't even know what questions to ask. You just need people to give you some unfiltered feedback. So we'll ask things like what's one thing we could change that would have made this better, and just like try to get one thing, one like concrete something we could have done. So on
Hmm.
one hand, like I love data and
Hmm.
feedback.
Hmm.
And on the flip side, one of the challenges that I found with a lot of our team as I started to implement this is, we do a thing, it would go well, and someone had some pretty sharp criticism somewhere in that
Surprise.
feedback, right? Like scored well, but one person wrote about like how much it sucked because of this, that, and the other thing. And then we all do what pretty much human beings do. Like you forget the 99 responses that said it was good and you fixate on like the one person that just ripped you to shreds.
Hmm.
And so one of the like sayings I've kind of adopted around the business is once is an anecdote, twice is a coincidence, three times it's a trend.
Hmm.
Once it's an anecdote, twice it's a coincidence, three times it's a trend, which basically means even if we're hearing some sharper feedback, you have to hear it multiple times, more
Hmm.
than once or twice. Anybody can hate anything once because human beings are wonderfully varied in their views and experiences, and frankly will be having their own day and life happening. You don't know what journey someone's on at the moment that they happen to interact with you and give you some point of feedback that may or may not be a reflection of you or may not be a reflection of what's going on in their world. So all of which is to say, like the
Hmm.
first thing to me when I think about feedback is that I want multiple data points. I want to triangulate. Of course, you're like grinning. Of course, I'll like build this into a spreadsheet if I can, because it's got to come back to spreadsheets. But like I'm very wary to put too much weight into any one
Hmm.
point of feedback. Now, there's sometimes I do that. Maybe I'll talk about that separately in a moment. But when I think of like the general case, you're putting things out there, especially when you're putting things out there in public, right? We redesigned our website, we're updating our logo, we're doing this thing on social media or podcasts. Like, you can't please all the people all the time, right? We all say that, and then anytime you do anything in any level of public, that hits home real fast. You
Hmm.
can't please all the people all the time. And so once I kind of accepted that reality, then, logical my brain me kicks in. I'm like, well, if I can't please all the people all the time, what is the acceptable percentage of people that I have not pleased before it's actually a problem?
Hmm.
And so then I start going to like, okay, well then I got to gather a broad level of feedback so I can really say, look, I've what if 80 or 90% of people like the thing, that's probably still pretty darn good in the grand scheme of things. A lot of stuff out there is very successful with way less than 80% of the people liking it. So if 80% like it, that's probably pretty good. And I'm gonna have to let go of the fact that 20% of the people aren't going to like it. because 10-20% of people aren't going to like anything because humans are humans and wonderfully varied. So my go-to on this is I need some volume because one-off feedback feels too one-off to me.
Yeah, I love that. I want to try something just because I'm curious how you'll respond. Because this is really interesting. So a couple of years ago, it was probably like 8 years ago, a friend of mine who's a tenured professor at a university talked me into he tried to talk me into getting into the PhD program.
Okay.
And what he wanted me to study, because I guest lecture at a couple different places, and what I often am talking about is the kind of creative, like what it feels like to try to be who you really are and express that in the world. Because a lot of that's, I think of that as financial planning, right? Like I'm
Yep.
trying to help you find out what really matters to you and then
Yeah.
do things. And so it's like, and a lot of what I love thinking and talking about is what does it feel like to make a thing, whatever the thing is, a business, a website, a podcast, and then say to the world, like Seth Godin says, like, here, I made this. I hope, in that word so powerful, like, I hope you like it.
Uh-huh.
And so, as part of this consideration of getting in this PhD program, I went to the fall seminar. And there was like, these are small groups at the PhD level. There's like 8 people and the professor's teaching. And I got like 3 or 4 weeks in, and there was just all this, a lot of what you were talking about. It's like what smart people do, get a lot of feedback, have data, do surveys, do customer research. Like this is all in the, product market fit, like all in the entrepreneurial startup world. But it felt so foreign to what I was thinking about. Because what I was thinking about is like, I have a thing that I cannot, there's no way I cannot put this in the world. I don't really
Yep.
quote unquote care what anybody else thinks. And so I started thinking of it as like this is this is oversimplifying, that there's these two versions of business. One is much closer to art and one is much closer to the widget factory. Like and you're analyzing competitive landscapes, doing customer research, doing surveys, getting feedback, getting data.
Hmm.
Right? That's what smart, logical people do. And then there's this other end where you're like, no, I want to do this. And I have a friend who had a donut shop on Abbot Kinney in LA. So like some of the most expensive real estate in the world, donut shop, right? And she could care less what your opinion of her donuts. Now, this breaks down when you go to like, well, you mean you could care less? Well, if nobody buys your donuts, you're not going to no longer have
Right.
the shop. And she would say, then I'll close the shop. So it's
Which,
interesting to me
which to
the
me gets to like someone was liking the donuts
yeah, yeah, yeah.
at a
So it's
premium
someone so
price.
it's really like the lines are not even close to clear. They're probably exactly the same business. It's just a different version of getting
Right.
data. So here's the thing I just want to I'm interested in, because if I've learned most of the time when I'm reaching out for feedback, like, okay, I've got a book I'm going to put in the world, I've got a cover. I think it's important to be clear about when you're actually looking for reaction slash feedback that might inform the decision versus when you're looking for to put ground under your feet because you're scared.
Ooh.
And I think whenever I'm looking for to put ground under my feet because I'm scared, like the feedback's not going to help. The feedback's probably going to make it worse, actually. Go on a walk, do something else, go meditate, go do your yoga, like whatever, meet with your counselor. Anytime, because I think that kind of space in the creative process, and by the way, creating an RIA firm is a creative act.
Yep.
I would also say, even at some level, a financial plan is a creative act. That little slice of it that's the creative act is going to always feel groundless. You know, like because you're doing new and novel things. You're helping somebody
Yep.
craft a set of values and goals that are new to them. But then there's this rest of it that so I think distinguishing between, hey, I actually want feedback. Because I remember Morgan Housel, when he decided to write this book that sold a few copies, um, millions and millions of copies, which puts it in 0.0001% of all business books. Morgan called and asked me what I thought of, I was among other people, I'm sure, what I thought of the title, The Psychology of Money. I told him that's a really bad title. Nobody will ever buy it, which is pretty funny. So call me for
You
business
know what's
title.
sad? If think about how many more books he would have sold if he had taken your advice.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. So a little while ago, when I was working on the title of my book, I said, "Can I texted Morgan. I was like, "Hey, can I run a title past you?" And he said, "Do it." And I was like, "Oh, you mean I can run the title past?" He's like, "No, name it whatever you're thinking of naming it, right? Because everybody's gonna have a million opinions and they're all gonna be wrong." And he's nice enough that he didn't remind me, throw it back in my face. So it's really interesting to figure out when is the feedback valuable, when are those surveys valuable, and when are they just an effort to make you feel secure about a creative act. Good luck with that one.
Let's say
Put
I
that
like
in your spreadsheet.
I mean there's still a piece of me that says like it's both. I'm not even
Yeah.
sure I distinguish those. Like I'm trying to find like yes, I'm trying to validate a creative act when we put those
Hmm.
when we put those surveys out. Again, just
Hmm.
but I want some volume of data because creative things are creative and hit different people differently, right? Donut shop woman knew that she was going to do her thing in a certain way and it was going to make a lot of people unhappy, or so. I don't know if um if only one out of every 10 people actually like the way that she does donuts, she's got to ask a lot of people to make sure that she can actually get to find the 10% who like it. But the reality is, if 10% of everybody in Beverly Hills comes to buy your donuts every day, you have a ridiculously successful shop because that's a lot of people. Like,
Right, right,
right? I
right,
mean,
right.
an advisory firm has 50 to 100 ongoing clients per advisor. It's like, cool. To be clear, if you make a thing that 99.999% of the population doesn't like, you'll have too many clients
Right, 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 right.
because we can't even serve 0.001%. That would be way too many people. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
and so
Let
like
me.
to me, just you need a volume of I mean, again, just like that's my nerdy data driven style to it. Like I need some volume of feedback, and I find particularly in this context when we're trying to create. I mean, whether you're creating art, whether you're creating a business, to me it all kind of falls in the same frame, right? I actually appreciated what you were commenting around entrepreneurs. Like the way entrepreneurship is often taught to young people is
Youngs.
go out into the world, find people who have problems, and
Mm.
then see if you can build a solution for their problems. And if you can solve their problems, you can charge the money for the service of the widget or whatever it is, and congratulations, you have a business. So like you spend time searching for problems. Those of us who create tend not to quite approach it that way. We create something that we believe is a solution. It's at least a solution in our head to something we've experienced personally, usually. Like we make a solution, and then you have to go find whether enough people have that problem that you can actually sell it and make a business out of it. Right? Donut shop lady was like, "This is how I make donuts. Now I have to find out whether enough people on this earth that are willing to buy my donuts in Beverly Hills to be able to afford my shop." Because the question for her is like, I know what I want to create in this world. Now I just have to find out whether enough people out there who will buy it to create a financially viable business. Where again, I don't need everyone to like it. I need enough people to like it so that I can do this in a economically viable manner. And so when I start looking for feedback, like I'm just trying to find out whether enough people find this useful. If I know who I'm supposed to serve, I'm going to mostly ask them and not like random strangers on the street. But To me, the whole nature of feedback, particularly in a creative context, is I'm trying to figure out whether I actually hit the mark. And I need a lot of people to give me feedback to figure out whether I really hit the mark because any one person can love or hate pretty much anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. I think it's interesting. There's an element, and there. It's not either or. It's both. And maybe maybe a single person could actually be engaged in both. But I often do find too, like there are people who they operate differently. They're both right,
Hmm.
right? And one of them I think is an internal focus of like, no, I'm really clear. This is the thing I want to do. I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to find out if there are enough people and if there aren't enough people, it's not like I'm going to change the thing. It just means it's not going to be a business. It'll be a hobby. It'll be, whatever else. Like, and then there's a more external, like, and there's a lot of the recent research around sort of like demand side sales, like really understanding where demand is coming from and why there's demand is this other side of like, let's see what the problems are
Yeah.
and then let's build a solution. And you're pointing to often what you do is this sort of like scratch your own itch model of like, look, and this is again another thing that Morgan said is he's writing for an audience of one, him.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to write the thing I want to read.
Right. And
And
then
then I'm going to
and
go out and find, and he just happens to be lucky that there's a lot of people that
right.
want to read the same thing.
And then you find out whether people, right, we create the advisory firm that we would want to be a client
That's right.
of,
That's right.
and then we go find out whether anybody else wants that as well. And again, to me, like that's the creative process. That's creative nature for what we do when we're trying to create, right? Like I make a thing that I believe is a solution, and I find out whether anybody actually wants to buy it as the solution to their problems and will pay me for it. But the reason why I start getting focused around feedback and like volumes of feedback is because of those scripts that start running, right? Like if I've got doubt, I'm going to hyper focus on the one or two people who say something negative.
Hmm.
Well, I wasn't really sure anyways. Oh, and like Bob didn't like it. Screw this.
Forget it. Right.
I gotta throw in the towel. Or we come the other direction. The reality is like I'm so convinced it's right for me. Other people must want this. And I found one other human being who said it was a great idea, so I'm going to keep sticking with it, even though everyone else is saying we don't want it, we don't like it, it's not going to work. And you can get in trouble the other way as well, which is
Yeah.
I found one person to validate me, which feels really good because I was so passionate about my idea, and then I spend months or years trying to make money in my passion that's not actually economically or business viable, right? If we're talking advisory firm context, because I'm clinging to the one or two people who say yes, I'm not actually looking at the volume of feedback, which is people just aren't buying this. It's
Yeah.
not showing up the way that it needs to be valuable for them, which again is why I so quickly come back to I really want to look at some volume of data because it's so easy to get swayed by one or two people who love it or one or two people who hate it, depending on whatever mindset you're coming to the thing with in the first place. That if you want to get a clearer picture, you need a higher quantity of responses. I'm really only a fan of one response, but just like it's a really expert oriented situation where someone can really give me expert feedback, then maybe I will narrow in a little bit. But otherwise, just like feedback has to have some volume behind it because otherwise our human brains just we see what we want to see was the
Yeah.
confirmation bias kicks
Yeah.
in whichever direction that we want, and you'll grab whatever one or two data points prove the thing that your brain is trying to prove.
Yeah, I agree. Let me propose something. I want to just make one other claim and then let's
Yeah.
do two or three rapid fire, like how do you deal with feedback, right?
Okay.
Like what's your best way of dealing with feedback? I'll give one or two, you give one or two. But one thing I just want to sort of as we tie up the philosophical discussion around it, like I think all the stuff you just said, it makes perfect sense, and I think it's really smart, and I think it's probably the way people should do it. Dot dot dot, and it's
And
not the way I operate best.
okay, so how do you operate?
Uh, I
Well,
and
it won't
it's
be a
interesting.
surprise to anyone that you might not take like the high volume spreadsheet approach that I do. So
And again, I want to be clear. I
yeah,
think
that's
that's
fine.
actually the smart way. I think the way I do it is wrong. Like, and here's an interesting quote I was playing around with the other day. It's and this is from a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. So it's a little bit of sort of Zen thought. It's quite usual for us to gather pieces of information from various sources, thinking in this way we are increasing our knowledge. And I think you could replace that with saying, thinking in this way we're increasing our confidence about the thing. And then the next line is actually following this way, we end up not knowing anything at all.
Wait, say that whole thing again. Just
It's quite usual for us to gather pieces of information from various sources, thinking that this is the way to increase our knowledge. And again, coming from Zen, right?
mhm.
Actually, following this way, we end up not knowing anything at all. And I think the an analogy you could make real quickly is like if you go to shop for new running shoes, and we've all had this experience, pick anything you want, and you go read the reviews. Right? If I go read the reviews on Amazon of the running shoes, I leave more confused than when I started.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's lots of ways for this to fall apart, and it's actually not what you're saying. The data thing is really smart. But this quote sort of points to like, one of the things I'm trying to do lately is, and I realized this again Tuesday night when I reached out for a bunch of feedback. I was like, wait, I don't want I am just gonna make a thing and then I'm gonna shelter myself, protect myself from feedback. Like I don't want to go on Reddit and
Okay.
read what people think about the Society of Advice because people think it's so, like I'm just gonna make a thing that I care deeply about. And I think we could spend a whole nother hour talking about that. It's not right or wrong. It's just it's just, and I've so that's a one of my core operating principles now is like attend. We talked about this quote years months ago. The Confucius quote, "Attend the way in isolation." Like really focus on the quality of the work, the thing that you really love. Make sure it has the craft. Make sure it feels good, and then say to the world, "I hope you like this," and then hide.
Yeah.
Which is so.
So
You give
I
me
don't
one more thought, and
disagree
then let's
with
do some
that.
rapid fire tactics.
I don't disagree with that
Hmm.
in the creative process. Again, like
Hmm.
I don't act well,
Hmm.
I'm kind of iterative in everything that I do, but like if I'm creating a thing, I'm creating a thing in my head. Like I have to get it out.
Hmm.
There comes a point where like once I put it out in the world, I mean, first of all, people will vote with their feet or their dollars about whether like this is a thing that you want to buy and pay for, right? I tend to come to this from a very business perspective. Like if I created a thing that's a viable business that people will pay for the service or the offering or whatever it is. And so I'm not really a fan of creating with feedback. It's like trying to
Hmm.
craft art by committee. Like it
Hmm.
just ends out being boring and not pleasant. Uh but once you create the thing, I mean, I guess in the purest sense, like art, once you make it, it's made and out in the world. Business to me is more iterative. I can make a
Hmm.
thing and take
Hmm.
feedback and then make it even better. And version 2.0 can be better than 1, and version 3.0 can be better at 2.0. So I assume there's room for iteration. That's when I want the feedback.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think what this points to is maybe it's just you agree on the principle. It's a function
Yeah.
of where's the line on the creative act. Like
Yeah, or like
what's
yeah, like
yeah,
what at what stage does it come? Because I'm very
interesting,
much not a like feedback in the drafting phase
fascinating. Yeah,
at
I like that.
all.
I like that.
Because I've got there's a thing in my head of what it's supposed to be, right? Like we got a vision,
Yeah,
and usually it's some version of this is what I would want if I was consuming it. But then eventually, again, at least in
yeah,
the business context, like, but if you want to get paid for this, At some point, you have to find out what the rest of the world thinks about it, and you don't have to please all the people all the time, but you
Right.
do at least need to
Right.
find some segment of people who
I
like
love that.
this, right? So in even in a context like our platform, look, huge swaths of people thinks it's redonkulously too long. We'll never touch one of our articles or podcasts with a 10-foot pole because it's exhaustingly long and they hate it. But then there's another segment of people that say, oh, I love this stuff because everybody else doesn't go deep enough, and this finally goes as deep as I want. So if I ask everyone, lots of people will dislike it. Lots of people do. We get that feedback regularly, and I don't care
About everyone.
of everyone. I care that there's enough people to like it that I can get paid for it. And
Yep.
once there's enough people that I like it that get paid for it, the only people whose opinion and feedback I care about are the people who consume it and like it in the first place, but could still help us get better and
Yeah.
do it better, right? So I don't care about the fact that some people just don't like long form content because I'm not here to serve them. There are people who do like long form content. Now, with people who like long form content, I really not want to know what their feedback is. How can I make this even better for you? But I'm
Love
not
that.
going to ask
Yeah.
everyone because then I'm going to ask a bunch of people who just think all anything long is dumb and takes too long, and they're not going to give me helpful feedback, which I guess is an indirect way of saying like careful who you're asking for feedback,
Yeah. Love that.
particularly if you're going to iterate based on their feedback. Like make sure you're asking feedback from people who at least like to be in the neighborhood in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting because that really helps because my like if we were drawing this on a continuum, you know, I, I just see the business as an art project,
Okay.
right? Like and so you see the business a little bit more like a business. I see the business a little bit more like an art project. Both of those are perfectly awesome, right? And then it's just a fine tuning of how like my one tip for seeking feedback, my one tip is try to design experiments around getting feedback where you get revealed preferences instead of stated preferences.
Correct.
So like instead of maybe asking somebody, just send the thing and see what the reaction is. And even instead of even asking them for a reaction, just literally like send the thing. I mean, as an example,
Correct. Like even our
is any
platform, we don't ask advisors what topics they want to hear more of.
ah,
We put some topics out and then we look at what actually gets engagement
that's a
and we
perfect
do
example.
more of what they actually respond to.
That's a perfect example. We just did this for the society topics. Somebody said, have you ever thought of asking everybody what the topics are? And we were like, we actually do. We just do it much more sophisticated. We actually watch what you respond to. We see click rates. We pay attention to the words you use.
I mean,
Yeah,
same thing
smart.
and just in the I did the same thing in the client context when I was more client facing, like what reports are they grabbing? What parts
Right,
of the plan
right.
presentation are they engaging with? And which parts are their eyes glazing over? And the parts their eyes are glazing over, like they're just literally not engaging with that. So we should probably either make that part a lot better or just get rid of that part or
Totally.
break it up or find some other way to do it. Right. The clients give
Yeah.
so much body language in how they're engaging in planning meetings. Like you can do it right down to the meeting level. What do you bring to the meeting?
Yeah.
How do you engage with them? It's all a version of revealed preferences.
Love that. Love that. And then the my last suggestion is it's very close to your everyone versus the specific person idea, but I think be as you're getting feedback. Well, one is I love your idea of the data. Like Jason Fried at Basecamp says, don't cut on the first, don't scar on the first cut. It's always surprising to me. Like we'll get one bit of feedback and suddenly we could be off rebuilding everything, and then somebody will
Yep.
go, wait, 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 wait. How many times? Oh, we've only heard that once. So I love that,
Which
and
is
I
why I do the once is an anecdote, twice is a
perfect
coincidence, at
same
least
version.
three
Yeah,
times for a trend.
love that. And then the last thing I'll say is, I think the axis on which I'm evaluating whether I'm going to take feedback is thoughtfulness. So
Okay.
if it's unthoughtful, meaning like yeah, I can't tell you how many people I've gotten feedback around my books that it's very clear from the feedback that they didn't read the book. Well, that's
Yep.
unthoughtful. Delete. Like I don't even have to like full permission to
Yeah.
delete without a second thought. Thoughtful, now I'm on a spectrum of like, is it critical or is it positive or negative? Both of those. In fact, if it's thoughtful and negative, that's gold,
Right.
right? Like if somebody took the time to be thoughtful in feedback and they just didn't like the thing, I'm super curious. Now, it probably won't change the thing, but it will probably help point out areas where I could have been distract
Right.
I could have gotten it a little wrong. Like,
Right.
oh shoot, you're right. If I had how did that person, what was it about the thing I did that
Yep.
how was I complicit in that experience they had? Is there something I could change just a little bit? Like, oh, that color, you're right, or
Yep.
that word, you're right, or that example of, I mean, why did I have to put a gender example in that article about
Yeah.
remodeling the kitchen? Like the gender, I get this long email about gender, and you're like, oh, you're totally right. You've you reader have missed the point, but it's because I confused you by having that gender thing in there. The gender was not the point. I'll pull the gender thing out. Now you get the point about the remodel. You know what I mean? Like that kind of loop.
Yeah, again, to me, a lot of it comes down to who are you getting feedback from? Are you getting feedback from the people you actually wanted to be reaching and serving who had a reasonable
Yeah.
chance of like liking the thing or
Yep.
buying the service or engaging the firm or getting the point or appreciating the art in the first place? If it's someone that I wanted to reach, I really care about your feedback about how I can do it better. If you're one of those people who just doesn't like the kind of thing that I'm doing, like that's totally cool. You be you, I'm going to be me, but like I'm not really looking for your feedback
Yep.
because you're just not into what I do in the first place.
This was maybe one of the most important things. Seth Godin's taught me a lot of things. This was one of the most important things he ever taught me, which was just a simple line. It's not for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like that group,
Mm.
you can feel completely full permission to
Oh,
either say or at least think, oh, that's okay. Thanks. That feedback was really, thoughtful. Thank you. And it turns out this thing's not for you. Right? I love
I
that.
like
So let
that.
me,
That's okay. Maybe it's not for you.
yeah, let me just mention one thing. This is kind of crazy based on what we've talked about, but when you hear this, I will probably have the final book cover.
Okay.
I would love people's reaction to it. So if you would like to send me a reaction to the book
Okay.
cover, send me an email, hello@behaviorgap.com. I will send you the cover and we can have a little chat. That would
Awesome.
actually be helpful.
And then in the future, we'll do another episode and see what the feedback is that you
That's
got
exactly right.
and
And
how
and
you
whether it
handled it.
could change, and I don't know if I could change it because it might be final, but it would be really useful. And this will be
Awesome.
probably a couple weeks from here anyway. So that was super fun, Michael. I think that's really
Awesome.
helpful.
Thank you, Carl.
Yep. Cheers.